Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Watchung Booksellers podcast, where we bring you conversations from our bookstore's vast community of book professionals who talk about what they do for the love of books. Thank you for joining us. I'm Catherine, and I'm here with my co-producer, Marnie. And this week we are sharing a repeat episode from 2025 because the night was so special. We celebrated our first Watchung Booksellers podcast birthday with a live book club event led by authors Elliott Dark and Dagmara Domińczyk.
Alice and Dag talked with the audience about one of our bookseller favorite reads, Loved and Missed by Susie Boyd. We wanted you to get an idea of how much fun this event was because we're doing it again, and you're all invited to join us on Thursday, May 7th.
This year, we are talking about The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante, which is just a slip of a book, but it's so rich and it begs for discussion. Plus, as Dagmara was in the film version of the story, she's going to have extra insight into the discussion.
And as a further perk, we're also airing the video of the event that our friend Dave Diometti recorded for us. It's on our YouTube channel, so you can hear and see how much fun this night was.
The upcoming book club ticket is $25, and it includes a copy of the book, as well as drinks and light bites. We'll also be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Montclair Literary Festival.
Visit our events page at watchungbooksellers.com for tickets to this and all the great events we have coming up. We can't wait to read and celebrate with our wonderful community. Enjoy the episode.
Hi, Dag.
Hi, Alice.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for setting up this really interesting program. I think it's a great idea to have book conversations like this, and I hope it's ongoing. And we have to acknowledge Marnie and Catherine for being so creative, and Margot for backing up everything and all the big ideas, and all the booksellers here who are so good.
Woohoo! And I'd like to thank Marnie for pronouncing my last name correctly. It'll be a good evening. It's a good sign.
Okay, so do you want to start, or should I start by asking you a question?
Well, Alice and I had lunch a couple of weeks ago to meet, because even though we both live in Montclair, we haven't really met, and I just thought she was amazing. And then, like a good Girl Scout, I went and read her books, Naked to the Waist and In the Gloaming, and completely was blown away by her writing. And now I'm a little bit in love and a little bit nervous. So I have a few questions for you too, but I don't know. Do you want to go first? Should I go first? I'll go first.
Okay, you go first.
Alice, can you tell me, because this is such a special book, and it's not, I never heard of it before. Marnie recommended it to me. So I'm curious to know when and how this book came to you.
That's a really good question. I was trying to remember exactly how I heard of it, and I can't remember. But then I mentioned it to my best friend, whose friend of hers was the U.S. agent for the book. And apparently they had a lot of trouble selling it in the U.S. She hasn't had a lot of her books sold here, and then New York Review of Books picked it up. But I had heard of it before because I read it, and I mentioned it to her and said, I read this book, and she said, I love that book too. But it wasn't through word of mouth. I think I read about it somewhere, and it just sounded like my favorite British women, fiction, which I kind of am a sucker for. How about you? Marnie told you.
Marnie told me, and she kind of, I remember vividly when I read it because it was the first book of fiction I read after my dad died 2 years ago. And for a couple of months, I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I couldn't do anything. And I don't know if Marnie gave me the book right before he died, or I was actually looking at my phone tonight. But for whatever reason, I didn't read it. And then a few months after, maybe my dad died in February, and maybe this was May. And the title just kind of spoke to me. I saw it on my bookshelf, Loved and Missed, because for me back then that title meant, well, my dad was loved and now he is missed. And why not, why not give it a go? Let's see if I can read again. And boy, oh boy, it spoke to me on so many levels at that moment in my life. And I never underline in books, I dog ear. It's bad, but I do. And all of a sudden, this is the same colored pencil that I used to underline, and I just started underlining. It was like Ruth was speaking to me on so many levels, grief and loving someone with an addiction and letting go. And I wept through the whole thing, and it became like a gift. So thanks, Marnie.
It's hard not to underline. I mean, I'll show my copy. Yeah. It's like got lots of Post-its, millions of underlines. And this was all before we even discussed doing this evening. I just was so deeply taken with this book. And I want to ask you about the title, but before that, I want to say that I was so swept up in this book the first time I read it, and I'm really eager to hear everybody's experiences when we come to that. But I realized the second time I read it that I missed so much. I was so enchanted with the language, with the writing, the sentences, and I was just focused on that. And then the second time I read it, I was like, what? She buys the baby? I really literally lost the plot the first time through because I just was enchanted by the language. And I think that's something that happens to me a lot when I read. I do read things twice if I like them, just to make sure I catch all of it. But I find that really fascinating because the second time I read it, it was like a whole different book. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I really got two in one, of understanding the depths of this novel. And I've sort of been in and out of it a few times now. And yeah, I think it offers up more and more the more you look at it. It's really subtle and so interestingly structured and done.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you about the title because we find out way late into the book.
Also, probably spoilers.
Yeah,
because
there's definitely spoilers.
Yeah, so show of hands, how many have not read it? Sorry, guys. There was a handful of hands that were raised, more than I thought, but oh well.
I'm in my opinion, you can't spoil a good book.
You can't.
It's really about how it happens and how you get there. It's not what happens. Yes. And this is certainly not a whodunit. I mean, there's nothing of that. So if we talk about things that happen, you get to that part when you're reading it, you'll just be like, oh, I already heard about that. That's wonderful. Now I'm reading it myself. So I think it'll be fine. So later in the book, we find out that Jean and Lily and Ruth are walking past a graveyard. And on a stone, there's the epitaph, Loved and Missed. Mm-hmm. And Lily, such a genius teenager, says, oh, at first I thought it was loved and missed, and then I thought it was loved and missed. Like it missed the mark, which I hadn't thought of that until she said it. And then that was just like opening up the whole book. Yeah. So many themes of the book. It was so brilliant and such a brilliant title. How about you? What was your experience?
With the title?
Yeah.
Also, Alice, just so you know, my first was, what did the title mean to you when you first read it? And then at the end, great minds.
Okay.
It's also funny that we had such opposite reading experiences because I too just read it again. I tend to not read things again. I don't know why. I don't. And then I'm always hunting for like awesome book quotes. And maybe if I read more than once, I would remember them. But this week I read it again just to prep myself. And it was this time around where I was struck by the language, by what she does with words, by how her sentences are fragmented or they go on, by the structure of the book. And the first time I read it, I read it from such a raw place that I missed all of that. And I was just fully gave myself unto the emotion Ruth was showing, hiding, battling. And so it's so funny that we had like opposite experiences. For me, like I said, because I was coming at it from a place where I was newly missing someone I loved, that's all it meant to me. To me, it felt like the title was spoken to someone. You were so loved and you are missed. And then at the end, when I read it again the second time, I realized, oh my gosh, there's like triple meanings in this title. It's quite genius. It's a verb. It's a directive. It's a missed is, missed like the mark. I loved you and I missed totally how to love you. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful title and picks up on those themes. The next question I have for you, Dag, is do you feel that the point of view is first person Ruth and then it switches to first person Lily? That is a spoiler because it's kind of...
But that happens at the very
It's a big surprise when it happens, but did you feel like Ruth was telling the story with someone in mind? I wondered because I felt like it was so intimate and she was so kind of defending a choice that she had made, that I felt that there was someone that was more specific than like a general audience, that there was someone there. And I wondered if you felt that way too. I don't have a person in mind.
Right.
I think it was me. But, I think it was like she's telling, I need you to understand. But I felt that there was an implied you, more than there is a lot of times with a first-person narrator.
Yes. I thought, even though it's first person, and she lets us into her frame of mind, or it felt the opposite of indulgent, It just kind of presented her life back then, now, as fact, as what was happening to her, page to page, memory to memory. And it was opposite of precious, or it didn't feel like this character was toying with the reader's emotion or anyone else's. It was so plainly stated, all the complexities of loving a daughter who's a drug addict, of raising a granddaughter, and then what happens to Ruth herself at the end. I don't know if I felt like... I felt such intimacy that I also had this kind of feeling like this is meant to be, she's meaning to chronicle this for someone. But I don't know for who.
Yeah, I didn't know for who either.
But it was so intimate and small in a way. She wasn't making these giant statements about her life, but just like step by step revealing what it is like to love and miss, I guess. I don't know. But yeah. Okay. My next question for you, Alice. Elliott Dark. Okay. What parts of the book, whether it's a certain character, a certain theme that is touched upon, spoke directly to you, that you have an intimate knowledge of, and what was completely kind of foreign or new? Do you know what I mean by that?
I do.
Okay, good.
I think I was very implicated by how she moved from the present to the past because of shame. Something would happen in the present, like in the beginning, her friend Christine says, "Oh, I saw your daughter Eleanor, sitting on the street with a bunch of other addicts, and I gave her 10 pounds. And then in the next scene, she remembers something she's deeply ashamed of, which is that she also gives Eleanor 4,000 pounds, but it's in exchange for Eleanor's daughter, her granddaughter. And I think that happens throughout the book when we move from the present to one of her memories of her past, her childhood, or, and especially at the end, we get a scene where the person that she had an affair with, who I think, well, we'll talk about that, who's Eleanor's father.
Right.
But she had an affair with her friend Christine's husband. And she's so shame. It's, again, shame. And then her mother's death, shame. And I really felt like I never exactly said to myself that when I get triggered by something and then I have like a very powerful, disturbing memory of the past, that it's shame that has brought me back there. And I've never seen it illustrated in a book this way.
Yeah.
But I thought it was unbelievably effective.
Yeah.
And so painful.
Yeah.
Because this is a woman who, we can discuss the morals of what she did, but she definitely is trying hard. She tried hard with her daughter. She's trying hard with Lily. She's a very popular teacher at her school. She's doing her best to keep her head above water in a very difficult life. And to feel that she carries that much shame. And in the beautiful scene where she and Lily are talking, which I thought was really the climactic scene. And
I know it's dog-eared and underlined, the shame part. Okay,
go ahead.
Friends,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Literally a dog-eared and underlined.
You read that part because, it's where she's really like, okay, if you didn't understand this is how this book is working, I'm going to put it on the page here. But
Yeah.
she does it in such a beautiful way because she's talking with Lily, and Lily says, I'm reading this book about daughters estranged from their daughters. And, okay, go.
So Lily, who is the best 15-year-old you could ever want to meet and who loves her grandmother like she is her mother, and that's just a fact. She says, it talks about shame a lot in the book, actually. Does it? What does it say? I wrote it down. Hang on a second. She reached for her school bag and pulled out her rough book. It says, shame cuts us off from receiving love from a partner or friends or family. And shame separates us from others because it feels incommunicable. And so we have to hide important parts of ourselves. I nodded. What do you think? Well, I can see why someone might think those things, have those beliefs. I was breathing carefully. It was a conversation I did not know how to have. But I too thought a lot about, it was all tied with my father's death and with addiction and how people struggling with any kind of demon, it's usually not the demon that gets them, but the shame they have about said demon. And so this circled, dog-eared, underlined really spoke to me as well. And it is so interesting that Ruth is battling all this shame, but yet I found her to be such a dignified.
She was.
Trying to hold on to her dignity as best as she could. It was heartbreaking. And it was also so badass of her, She's kind of one of my favorite characters I've stumbled across. Would you be friends with Ruth, you think? You, Alice?
I would love to be friends with Ruth. I really would. I loved seeing her with Jean, and their friendship was so enlivening to read. And Jean was such a wonderful character. And I liked seeing her with her old friends too. Like the book opens in a kind of an interesting place of, she says the ghosts. I had an evening of old ghosts, and they were her childhood friends who she had like when she was, a preteen, it seemed like. She went to school with them. And I liked, this is an aside, but I liked using the word ghosts in the first sentence because this is such a haunted book. And they weren't ghosts, they were her real friends, but it was such an interesting way to put it. They haunted her because they knew about her past. I love people like Ruth who are very self-contained and just stiff upper lip, you know. You never really heard her complain about anything. She doesn't impose any of her problems on Lily. She feels that she did on Eleanor. And then she's strong enough not to repeat that. You know, she obviously has thought a lot about what went wrong with Eleanor. And I don't think that we can blame Ruth for the fact that Eleanor became a drug addict. But she has her own sense of blame for needing Eleanor too much and sort of asking her to take a role that was inappropriate for a young child. But you know what? That happens all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we do need our kids.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just goes in that direction. So I thought she was hard on herself about that. But no, I thought she was delightful. She's so funny, too.
She's so funny.
I mean, some of her opinions were just so, really, so charming. Yes, I would. Would you?
I would definitely. And that's the one problem, not problem, but even last night when I got to the part that I got to, that I remember just like, bleh, I just was wiping away tears. I knew what was going to happen, and it did. And I just wanted kind of I don't know, I just wanted Ruth to I wanted a better ending for her, but I also understood that that's life, like you said. And even in her dignity, even in her stiff upper lip and making her witty, dry opinions known, you know, then there comes a passage where she locks herself in the bathroom and says, and then I punched myself in the face because she couldn't take everything that was going on. And then she moves on, and she's so human. She's so unapologetically human. It's just really striking. And none of it is, like I said, there's nothing performative about this book. And yet it's so full of the heavy, real things that women and people go through in life.
I also really loved the way that she entered into scenes. Mm-hmm. Like that first one that we were talking about. And then the second chapter, you see her take a painting that we find out later was given to her by her husband, and she goes and sells it at a cafe and is given £4,000 for it. You have no idea why any of this is happening. And I really love this. You gradually get into the situation and the scene, but it really is like the way she would be telling the story to herself. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's like her, oh, and then that day that I sold the painting, you know, it starts there instead of saying, then that day that it was Lily's christening. You know, it's like her memory of it, which I think was such a great strategy because the writing was so great. I'm willing to wait to find out what's happening in the situations.
It's like Susie Boyd has faith in the audience that finds this book and isn't catering to anyone but the people who will fall in love with this book, you know? So she's not spelling everything out, and you have to you're just along for this ride, and you're just following Ruth from page to page, which I also loved. And so I also read it slowly. Usually I'm a very fast reader, and I just parceled it out for myself because it made me think so much and reflect and, you know, I don't know.
Well, I would love to ask you about what she does about Lily. And it's kind of a two-part question because her decision that it's not going to work for Lily to be with Eleanor. Mm-mm. So she's really making a choice between Lily and Eleanor. And it's very heartbreaking. I found it extremely heartbreaking because Eleanor keeps wanting Lily back. And Ruth won't give Lily back. And, you know, I thought it was so well portrayed, and we're so involved in Ruth's mind that we completely understand why she does this. But then when you step away from it, like, this is really a complicated situation. And, you know, it bears a lot of thinking and discussion. I'd love to talk to everybody what they thought about her actions. But I wondered what you thought about that and how it was presented and the role of Jean in this. Mm-hmm. Because Jean is, you know, if Jean's her like sounding board about this.
I love Jean too. She's that friend that will just give her that extra boost that she needs, that kind of, you know, even though Ruth is direct. I think Jean is the straight shooter, and she says it like it is and kind of gives her like the impetus to take Lily. And I'm so glad she did. And I think partly Ruth has come to understand the disease of addiction in her daughter. And she is able to love her as best as she can without judging her, as best as she can, like trying her best. So what else is there to do? She's lost her daughter to this disease, this addiction. And yet, she never closes the door on her, really, which is such a feat. We live in such a culture where anybody toxic, anybody difficult that we love, especially suffering, it's very hard to love an addict. It's very hard. And so the fact that she doesn't close that door all the way and yet understands somewhere in her maternal mind that her daughter will not be able to take care of Lily. And in a way, I felt like I can't save her. I cannot save Eleanor. And maybe she wasn't thinking, at the end when Lily thanks her for everything and people tell her, you saved this girl, you saved Lily. Ruth can't almost, to her it felt like a selfish act, like a replacement maybe, or she was questioning that and the least she could do. And yet it was the most heroic thing she could have done. That's how about you?
I like the way she told it too, because we get the scene of her giving them the money, mm-hmm. and it's a very subtle, mm-hmm. It unfolds very slowly, and then she has that wonderful moment when she looks over and she sees that the priest saw the whole thing, and she thinks that he's judging her. I didn't, but she thinks that. But then later, so she gives it to the reader like, okay, I traded money for the baby, and it's a shock. It's a shock. But then later she tells us Lily was in the hospital. She was born an addict. She was in the hospital. She finally had to be given morphine because nothing could calm her down. I went over every day. I cooked. I did, I was keeping the house afloat. And then finally after the 7 months, she's like, this is untenable. It's an untenable situation. But she doesn't give that to us first, mm-hmm. which I thought was so smart. She lets us have our reactions to this situation before she tells us why mm-hmm. she did it. Just really good writing and really good plotting, to understand how to allow the reader to have their response to this complex moral situation, but then to bring the character back in, mm-hmm. and then we're back with her again. I loved that. I thought that was so good.
It was. You become part of the story, and just that kind of, what would I have done? What would I do? What would you do? And calling in mind your own judgments, your own, preconceptions about you. Basically later she says, I sort of kidnapped you.
Yeah.
But it was for that money. So
is it time for us to open up?
All right.
I just want to make sure that other people get a chance to have their say.
Because we can go on and on, can't we?
Yeah, and I have questions for everybody.
When you said initially she bought the baby, she gave them for the baby. I've only read it once so far. I will read it again to see how I respond, but I felt kind of indignant because I didn't realize till that moment how much I was identifying with her. And I really felt that you just that's how you describe it. That's how much I identified with her.
I felt that way too when I read it, but when I stepped back and I thought, wow, she's presenting a really complex situation. And it is a really difficult situation because it's like the dilemma of foster care. Like, when do you take a baby away from the parent? When do you? And who gets to decide? Where's the line? I don't think it's simple at all. And she makes a case for where she drew the line, and we're allowed to understand that. But I think it's raising a really complicated question that bears a lot of thought, not just in the book, but in society in general. You know,
in the beginning, I had a lot of trouble with Ruth because she was the emotion was so repressed. And when she talked about
really?
Yeah.
I totally identify with it.
So actually, that's what I love about your writing, is this repressed emotion.
Thank you.
But she talked about her daughter Eleanor as being sick or having a little problem. And I'm like, she's an addict. Like, there was no initial recognition, but as you said, the story unfolded so beautifully that you learned all that. But along with all this repressed emotion, then you get to Lily, and it's just pouring with love and openness. And so to me, that was a beautiful contrast.
Yeah, it's really interesting too about, you know, just the discussion of Eleanor's addiction, because she does keep it, the reality of it, even though she understands what's going on and she doesn't expect much from her and she doesn't condemn her or judge her, but she's not explicit about it. Lily is. You know, when we get to Lily, she has all the language about exactly what's going on, and Ruth never really does. You know, she tries at the very last when she thinks, okay, she's going to have to take over. So she goes to that 12-step meeting, which is, you know, of course she hates it. It's, you know, she hates it, but she doesn't take it on at a certain level that Lily actually does. Lily takes it on much more directly. But Lily's a whole person, and Ruth isn't a whole person, you know. You see where she's, what I mean by that is she's riddled with guilt, shame, all kinds of things. And as far as we see with Lily, she isn't. You know, she's been given the opportunity to feel confident and have direct relations with people in a way that it's so beautiful, I think.
I also think it's so funny. I look at it a little differently, because she's been living with this addiction for a long time. And after a while, it wears a person down, whether you're the spouse or the parent or the sibling. And so to call her sick is not demeaning, but it's you yourself learning to live with that, so that every day isn't you weeping on your knees. You know, it's kind of a protective thing after a while. So I never really looked at it as repression. I just looked at it as survival.
Yeah,
she's trying to survive through this. That's how I saw it.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about Alice's question regarding who Ruth might be addressing in the novel. That's such a good question. And my reaction to that is I almost feel like she's writing to herself, because it's like a journal, and it's like she is struggling and not fully, not really complete in a sense, and worn down. And because her mind and her thoughts are just so fascinating, and we're so deep in her psychology, I was just completely taken by her voice, and it was amazing. The other thing I found incredibly moving was the switch at the end to Lily as the narrator, because I was thinking too, as I was reading, because I'm a writer, so I'm actually in the Sunday writing club, and I was thinking, we want to think about what is the misbelief of this protagonist, and I was like, I don't know, does Ruth have a misbelief about the way the world should work, something that will be, kind of resolved later? And I thought, it's not necessarily resolved, when she dies. And I thought, her misbelief is that she thinks she's not worthy. She thinks she's a bad person. And that's why I was so moved by Lily, because then you see her through her granddaughter's eyes and how incredible she was, and how heroic she was. So anyway, to share that.
Thank you. I would really love to know. I really appreciate that, and I'd love to know what other people thought about the switch in point of view.
Yeah.
To Lily at the end of the book.
Or did you think Ruth is a reliable narrator? You know, when you read a play or when you're in acting school, they say you don't really understand your character by what they say about themselves, but what others say about them, you know? So I feel like Susie Boyd had to include that because it gave that whole person kind of view of Ruth that we weren't going to be able to get from her.
No,
you know?
I totally agree. I have the first time I read it, I was very jarred by it, and I didn't like it. That shift. And then the second time I thought this is like total genius because we really, not only do we see Ruth through Lily's eyes, we see what Ruth did.
Yeah.
We see how amazing this person is and how she handles as a 15-year-old just very difficult things and how she adapts to being with I mean, it's just amazing. But I felt that this is like the best possible way to end this book. But what did other people think? Or any other question you want to say?
I agree that for me, it felt like an inner monologue. It was as Ruth was working through everything that she was going through in her head, and we were going along for the ride. And that switch at the end, for me, was so amazing. That's when the sobbing started, because Lily saw who Ruth was. Ruth never saw who she was. She just wasn't able to see, and she did something really great. She raised Lily. Lily was amazing because she had Ruth, but Ruth didn't really know how to accept that. She didn't know because she was damaged herself, and then she was dealing with the trauma of having a child who was an addict. So Lily's voice, this wasn't a happy ending book, and I'm glad, but hearing Lily describe how good Ruth was, for me, was just amazing, because Ruth never felt that.
No, she doesn't feel at all free, but she raised Lily so free. When they're in their little apartments together, Lily has such emotional freedom to be herself. And I just loved the portrait of domesticity in this book. And it's really interesting because there's really only one meal that ever gets cooked. When when Ruth is trying to make a meal for her boyfriend and she throws it in the trash, it doesn't work. But otherwise, it's all cakes and slices of cheese and grapes and, it's snacks. They're just like 15 years of snacks.
That's me. That made me feel better because I don't cook, so I better make a mean snack plate. Also, that for mothers, that kind of juxtaposition of, and it doesn't have to be as dramatic or full of despair. It's just watching your child become an adult and you not having the kind of weight and the kind of influence that you once had. And I'm not even just talking about, what happens to Eleanor, versus that kind of yes, and that Lily is. Yes, she's so optimistic. She's so full of love. They get to laugh and enjoy each other. And, there's a sweet window, I remember, in my life when my boys were at a certain age where we just played all day and I wasn't tired from them and I wasn't so afraid of what would happen because it seemed so far in the future, them being adults. And that kind of buoyancy was so bittersweet to have those two snapshots of what a child is. A child that is a grown-up and a child that is just blossoming. And but there is one moment, do you remember it, Alice, in the book, where Lily says to the doctor, "Oh, I hope that you never talk to your mother the way you just talked to mine." And Ruth does
That's
said,
my sister.
And and Ruth does say, "I did that."
Yeah.
And I was so happy for her in that moment that
so
she
great.
felt that pride.
Yeah.
That
really
Lily was able to just knock that asshole
It
down.
was, yeah. And she did it with such dignity. She
Yes.
got the dignity
Yes.
from Ruth.
That's all we want, right? Get our good stuff, okay? Just the good stuff.
Well, that's interesting because I did think that it was sort of like Eleanor got Ruth's impulsivity and her, she got
Recklessness,
the parts of her that were not as well
troubling,
equipped to deal with the world, and Lily got her strength. And I thought that was wonderful too, to show different parts of Ruth's personality between how these two people that she raised, what they became. Yes.
We're using a lot of terms like, amazing, heroic for Ruth, but I'm glad to have that leavened with her affair with her friend's husband, because otherwise it's too much of a one-dimensional positive character in my mind. And while I admire the descriptions of domesticity, sometimes, I thought this was a brilliant way of writing. I thought sometimes they could also read as a little bit cloying to different temperaments. So while it worked with Lily, I could also see that maybe similar actions with Eleanor could be suffocating. I found sometimes the depictions of domesticity, she spoke of her relationship with her daughter, granddaughter in a very spousal way, with a lot of we's in a way that, I don't know, I found it interesting to think about it, so I had more complicated feelings about Ruth.
Well, I think that's really fair, and I think it's one of the really fascinating things about this book, because I do think it allows us space to bring our own judgments of her as a mother into the book, on all different levels, like whether we think she did the right thing, whether we think she didn't, whether she thinks she was great, whether she thought, whether, as you say, you can look at it, and that's deliberately, I think it's deliberately put in there, because I don't think she was trying to create a portrait of a heroine.
Yeah.
I think she was trying to create a portrait of, someone who was doing her best, but that's why I said, she bought the baby. Like, looking at it from the outside, there's a lot of questions around that action that she took. So yeah, I think that's really fair. I think that's a good reading too. I think it's a good reading too, and I think the book, it's one of the greatnesses of the book, is it allows for that reading.
Yeah, and I never looked at her as a positive character. Like, she's not an optimist. She's not a saint by all means. Like, sometimes I wanted to shake her a little bit, but it is, again, what we bring into her. We start to psychoanalyze her, and she's not really, maybe she's dabbling in psychoanalyzing herself, maybe she's writing this to herself when she gets ill. I feel that too, that it's kind of to herself. And you're right about raising Lily one way versus raising Eleanor. And you could be a great mother, it just depends on the kid you get, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And at a certain point, no matter what you do, there is a human child who also has things that are unto them only, right? And she's lucky she got a Lily.
There was that great moment, and after she knows she has cancer, I think it's the first paragraph of chapter 9, where she's burning. I'm burning stuff. I'm burning my papers. It's like, what are these papers that you feel you have to burn?
And Eleanor's letters.
And she's burning Eleanor's letters. So, we've seen what we've seen, but I think raising the question, like, how reliable is she as a narrator? There's a lot of stuff we don't know. And what are Eleanor's letters, and at what period did they come?
Right.
Because we see her trying to reach out and get in touch with Eleanor. We don't really see the reverse. It's not, that part of the story isn't told to us. So, yeah. I have a question. Does anyone else? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I went into the book kind of with that attitude as well. And then we got to the scene where she finds the shoe in the coats. And I was like, I'm in. So I think like there's a sort of like, it's a combination of different things in this work. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, go for it. Sorry. I thought one of the most poignant parts was at the end where the priest, when she asked for the priest, and it was the same priest who was there at the beginning, and I felt like it kind of helped the book come full circle. I mean, I audibly gasped when we found out it was the same priest, because he was there at the beginning, you know, when she took Lily, and he was so compassionate and understanding. And then to be there 15 years later to see that she succeeded and was able, you know, to raise this baby, I just felt that was really just a moving part and just something I wasn't expecting to happen.
Okay, I had a very different read on that, which was that it was a fantasy, that it was the same priest. Oh. I think it even says something like that. Does anyone else read it that? Yeah.
I may have missed that.
And
that was in my own fantasy.
Yeah, no, I think because she, you know, when it happened, she had seen him looking at her and judging her, and I think she brought him back in her mind to absolve her at this, you know, at her death. And that's something I really wanted to ask about. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I wanted to ask about the very end of her section where Eleanor comes and then everything's good and Eleanor's going to be fine. And I wondered if others also thought that was a fantasy, because I did. Yeah, you thought it was. Yeah. I thought this is not really happening. Eleanor's never come when she was supposed to come. You know, she brought her, like she brought the priest. I think she needed these things.
That's so interesting.
Well, I
might have to read it a third time.
That's my reading of it. I'm not saying I'm right. You know, it's always the way we read things.
I also thought it was so interesting that her very last sentences, I felt myself slip into a state of mourning, as if she's now going to, not like like how you read or see in movies where people accept death, like I'm going to the better place, but a state of mourning that she's finally going to allow herself to grieve. Like she's almost...
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great interpretation. Beautiful.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, I'm talking to you. I love that.
I'm curious what you guys thought about why we never heard from Eleanor's perspective or point of view. And if you think how that would have gone. You know, like a few minutes ago you said how the letters going from one to the other, sure was one group of 12, but didn't really hear Eleanor's side of things.
Well, you know, from a writing point of view, I'll just tell you why. If it were me, I wouldn't have given Eleanor's point of view, because Eleanor's not a developing character. You know, she's an addict. It's a static character. She doesn't get better. So in terms of dramatic development, there's nothing there. All we would hear would be, you know, it would be her thoughts about other people. There's no arc for Eleanor in the book. So I think that's probably, I mean, I don't know why she didn't, but I was just curious. Yeah.
I kind of agree, because unless she becomes this redemptive, she got out of it, she went to rehab, and there's a journey there, and she could look back reliably, but she couldn't. And I also thought that was a really heartbreaking, beautiful thing. There's so many people who struggled in this way who never get better. Just never get better, most. And so I think it would have cheapened it slightly if Susie Boyd tried to give her a voice in a way. I don't know, that's just my... And by cheapen, I don't mean like she doesn't deserve a voice, but this is just who she is.
I heard there's a couple of great podcasts that she does interviews for, and that question was asked, and she said she did write Eleanor's point of view. It didn't work.
Yeah.
So she took it out. And another thing she said, which I thought was really fascinating, she said the whole time she was writing the book,
she could feel this other book sort of lurking in the background, which I loved. She was like, there was a whole other part of the book that needs to be written.
Ooh, I hope it comes. I hope we get that.
And the Tombstone story is true. That happened.
Oh, that's so great. I didn't listen to anything that she said about the book
Me too.
to prepare for this, but maybe I will now. I have a question I want to ask people. So I looked up in Amazon the categories for this book: family life fiction, women's domestic life fiction, contemporary women fiction, which I really thought was way reductive for what this book is. And I also think, I mean, look at the audience. There's 2 men in the room. I mean, why is this a women's book? I don't understand. It's about women. It is, but I mean, isn't this a big human, big, juicy, meaty human story? Written in a domestic setting, but I don't know how you can get more important about life than this book. So I just wondered if anyone had thoughts about that, because I'm always really like, where are the men? Why aren't they here? This is like this is going to be a classic, this book. Yeah.
Well, the men aren't really in the book either.
Kate, explain.
Well, the question's like bait. I don't know about this book in particular, but in general, I will note that having worked in newspapers for years, when I or other women have written essays about parenting our children, they're usually in the style section. And when men write essays about parenting their children, they're in the ideas section.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's 2025.
That's a depressing thought to leave us with.
Aren't we past this now?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, okay. We don't have to talk about that, but I just wanted to bring it up because when I read these, it doesn't even say literary fiction.
That's crazy.
And it doesn't say addiction. There's a lot of things, big themes in this book.
And grief and loss.
That are in the Amazon categories, and they're not there. So it just seems
maybe just some morons looked at the cover and were like, oh, all right, it's a girl.
By the way, is this not the best cover? I mean, wouldn't you buy the book just because you want this in your room?
Jana told me that it's a famous painter's, and then of course looked at all of her stuff, and it's phenomenal. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's interesting because it's Chantal Joffe, people probably know. And she's a British painter and she's contemporary. And Marty went into this deep dive of Chantal Joffe's work and said, I feel like this is what I look like. Because they're mostly portraits of women. I come from the art world, and I was really, it really works well with the book, that it's just frank.
Yeah.
And it's not made up, and it's not, we were joking that they're definitely not paintings from a mirror or from a selfie, like they're just very,
they're not images of beauty. None of her, very few of the paintings you look at.
So it was a self-portrait by the painter? Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, she has a whole lot of paintings of mothers and daughters.
Okay.
It's just that they're not glamorous. They're never glamorous, but the clothes are amazing.
No, I love, yeah. No, I think this is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I wondered, you mentioned that Eleanor coming back when Ruth is in the hospital was a fantasy, and that we all know that addicts aren't going to come through. But didn't you think for a while she might come when Lily was so worried about what's in the apartment and how I did?
You mean when she tells her, come take whatever you want?
Yeah, I thought she might come, and I guess that's my,
But isn't
isn't
that always the hope of if you?
And I guess that's maybe like Lily has been somewhat immune to that. She hasn't experienced it in the same way that Ruth did. Ruth, of course, knew.
And that's what leads to that beautiful scene where they discuss shame. That, when Eleanor doesn't show up that day. Oh no, that's a different day.
That's a different
Eleanor
day.
doesn't show up that day because.
Or maybe she showed up, but she's just as in a bad way as before, and it's just to help Lily is making up the part to help to help Ruth.
I also think as much as, as you were saying, Dag, that just to protect herself, Ruth had to, think of Eleanor in certain terms. And I think the same thing for Eleanor, because she wanted Lily like the first year of her life. And then she wasn't going to get her. So she had to distance herself, which is very sad. I found that extremely sad. I felt really sad about Eleanor the whole time.
Yeah, I went into this book, I think, with a lot of TV shows and movies in the back of my mind, thinking that there would be this big redemptive arc, and felt that my expectations were let down, which is truly the experience of loving someone with addiction, right? So in that way, the book is reflecting that back. But what I just put together when you were talking about at her deathbed that she goes into death mourning, it made me wonder if she's finally able to mourn the fact that those hopes and dreams will never be fulfilled. Because she must all the way to her deathbed be holding on to that hope and wish. And only if her death does she actually grieve that it won't happen.
You're right.
Yeah. I think so too. And I love that there's no romanticizing. There's no romanticizing. Even the cute moments she has with Lily, you can't help but think like she had to take Lily, otherwise she would not be able to go on, Ruth, I don't think, or she would completely close herself off from the world. And so Lily was a literal lifeline for her. But even so, there's so little romanticizing all these big themes in the book. And it's such an act of bravery as a writer, I think, to do that, because you're not counting on the audience's empathy. It's one of the most brave little books I've ever read in my life in that way.
It's something that I love about literature from not this country, where there is more emphasis on the likable character. That this is like a fascinating character you can feel for, a character you can want for and need for, but you're not necessarily going to say this is a likable character. She's not set up to be. She's set up to be challenging,
You don't maybe you don't like her, but God, you root for her, don't you?
Yeah, and appreciate her incredible strengths.
That's why I don't think it could ever be adapted, no way, to a film or something. I was thinking about that, Marnie. A play,
that's what
but
I told Dag she should do it as a one-woman show, because I think it could be a great one-woman show.
Maybe Emma Thompson could do a better job.
I think you could. I think you could pull it off.
Well, maybe.
Any other questions or thoughts?
The people in the audience who have not read the book, are you gonna run out and get it, or? Oh, good! Yay, Alice! Good.
It's really worth it. I mean, I think it's unusually well structured. I mean, just from a writing point of view, it's unusually smart the way she puts this book together. And then on top of that, it's so moving and beautiful. It has the whole thing. I haven't read a book I like this much in a long time.
Me too. It's a gem. It is.
Thank you, Dag and Alice, for your brilliant insights, and to everyone who joined us live and is listening to the show now. Special thanks to Scott Gurian of Radio Free Montclair for handling sound, and Dave Dumetti, friend of the store, for recording video. And listeners, thank you for being part of the Watchung Booksellers podcast. We look forward to bringing you more wonderful conversations in the year ahead. The Watchung Booksellers podcast is produced by Catherine Council and Marnie Jessup, and it's recorded at Watchung Booksellers in Montclair, New Jersey. The show is edited by Catherine Council, and original music is composed and performed by Violet Muica. Art and design and social media by Evelyn Moulton. Research and show notes by Caroline Shirtleff.
Thank you to the staff at Watchung Booksellers and the Kids Room for all their hard work and love of books.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, please like, follow, and share it. You can follow us on social media at Watchung Booksellers. And if you have any questions or ideas, you can reach us at wbpodcast@watchungbooksellers.com.
We'll see you next time. Until then, for the love of books, keep reading.